Hey folks, it's your pal Mike Shea from slyflourish.com and twitter.com/slyflourish. Here with our regular episode. Oh no, my name is wrong. Hang on, I'll fix that. Here with another episode of Sly Flourish's Lazy DM Prep. This is a weekly show on Sundays at 10 a.m. in which I get on Twitch and prepare for my Sunday D&D game. In this case, I am playing, what am I playing? Waterdeep Dragon Heist. And it's wrong up in the corner, so I'm going to fix this real quick. Waterdeep. Waterdeep Dragon Heist. There. All set. And get derailed by a bunch of charlatans in chat. Yes, that is the plan. Yesterday was a great show where I prepared for a Princes of the Apocalypse game. I've still got sniffles. I'm sorry. I know that makes for terrible radio, terrible twitching. But it's either that or not have a show. Sorry. But I have drinks again. Anyway, it'll be fine. So, yesterday I was running a Prince of the Apocalypse game, and I hopped on to prepare for that and ended up talking about Baldur's Gate and Arcanum Worlds and I don't know what else. A whole bunch of stuff. So, it was a really fun show, and it did teach me a valuable lesson, which is that I can get away with very little prep and still run a 4-hour game, because I ran my Prince of the Apocalypse game, and it went all right. My camera's everything's a little bit of a mess today. There we go. Navy DM is here. Hey, Navy DM, I just saw that you posted a great article about Adventurers League. And I was like, oh, I want to read that. Oh, but I got a show. So I'm going to have to read that later. But it looked really funny. It was It's Not Me, It's You breakup letter to Adventurers League. I don't know that. It's very funny. So, on this show where I talk about Waterdeep Dragon Heist, I'm instead going to talk about Adventures League, because I think for about 20 minutes at the end of the show yesterday about Adventures League. So we're going to put a pin in Adventures League and set that aside, and instead talk about the other part of the show, which is preparing for a game. If you are not familiar with Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, or the magical 8 steps of Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, there's nothing really magical about them. You can see a series of YouTube videos that are all linked below, both on Twitch and on YouTube, in which I go through an overview of all 8 steps and then each of the 8 steps in depth. I did that so I don't have to go through them all in this show. Instead, I will expect that either you can follow along and figure out what we're talking about, or you can go watch those videos and catch up. So in either case, you can do that. You can also, there are links down below to download the sample chapters from Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, which includes a summary of the 8 steps. So if the 8 steps aren't familiar to you, and they're pretty straightforward, but if they're not familiar to you, you can either read about them in that sample chapter or watch the videos about them and follow along. But also this show tends to go off in all new directions as well. I thought I would spend a couple minutes talking about the Princes of the Apocalypse game that I ran yesterday, because I'd had the show. And I was obviously pretty underprepared for that game. I won't say unprepared, but underprepared. And it went fine anyway. I knew where they were going to start. They ended up starting in the Grand Stair, heading down into the Temple of Black Earth. And then I ran a room-by-room dungeon. And what it kind of taught me was that if you're in the middle of a dungeon, preparation isn't nearly as hard, because they only have so many different places they can go. So I spent about a half hour before people showed up reading through all of the rooms in the Temple of Black Earth, kind of just, skimmish reading. And I didn't read all the flavor text, but I sort of read the descriptions just to get an idea. And that worked well enough. And then they went through all of the Temple of Black Earth and then headed down into the Fane of the Eye and started crawling through the Fane of the Eye. And when they went down there, they started discovering that the elemental groups are all at war. And a really interesting thing came up. And this is where it's like a lack of preparation can help. They started talking about which one of them is going to take over which of the cults. So instead of we need to go kill all the cult guys, they were like, maybe we need to take over. And we've got an earth person and we've got a fire person. All we need is an air and a water person, and maybe it's better if we take this over, because they realize that the cults are unbalanced when they're dead. So and they're like, and when we take over, we're not going to destroy everything. We're going to remove the word cult and just call them sort of co-op, or organization or something. So they're not evil, but they definitely feel like maybe we need to step in place. So I think that I should spend a little time thinking about how they can do that, because I think that would be a fantastic direction for this to go. That's very different from where the adventure goes. And again, like just having the loose framework to run the game and making sure that it had enough to kind of fill the scenes out, but letting them decide how they're going to do it is really, it's a big advantage to this low prep style that some of us have grabbed onto. So that went really well. Like I said, I mean, everybody who saw the show yesterday, and if you didn't, you can see it on YouTube. If you want to watch another hour of me talking about D&D shit. Oh God, I swore. Sorry. If you want to talk about, see me talking about another hour of D&D stuff, then you can watch the show there and see how underprepared I was for the game. And still, it went fine. Everybody was happy. I didn't really scramble around. The only tricky bit is like I never made a decision about like where are the prophets now. And one thing that didn't really occur to me is that like the Fane of the Eye is sort of a hub. It's 2 levels down. If you think about the dungeons in Princes of the Apocalypse, are essentially 4 layers. You have the keeps up above that were made by adventurers. You have the temples, which were all built by the Besselmere dwarves. You have the Fane of the Eye, which was built by Drow. And you have the elemental nodes, which are these borderlands between the elemental planes and our world. So those are the 4 layers. And then each of those layers has multiple pieces, except one of them, which is the Fane of the Eye, which is all of them. And the Fane of the Eye, they can all sort of go together, right? They all mash together. So I think that I need to play that up as a war zone between we're werewolves, not swearwolves. Very nice. You can run that one, especially now that it's gone crazy. So I had like a bunch of dead water cultists, right? And then I had it that the air, I think I'm going to have it where they'll see that the air cult is getting destroyed, and they'll see that the upper temples are going to get blown up by the fire cult. And then they'll run into the earth cult and deal with the earth cult. And then I'm going to have to figure out how to deal with the fire cult. And I'm going to do all this probably in 2 more sessions. I think in 2 sessions we will complete this adventure. It's sort of an abbreviated version, a little less dungeon crawly than the book allows for, but they're now level 9. They were level 8. They're now level 9. They're leveling every session. It's about a 4-hour game. So, Leohan J says, first time watch you streaming. Great. Welcome. If you have any questions or thoughts, now's the time, since you happen to have me live, or any topics you want to talk about or hear me talk about. Anyway, really fun game. People had a good time. I had a good time. All theater of the mind. I did use, so I have one of the jumbo-sized iPads, and I used the maps from D&D Beyond so that the sighted players could see what the layout was like, and then I would describe it out loud as well, so that the one player we have who is blind could also see, or could also recognize, understand the layout of the dungeon. But it's always tricky when it's like, you enter from the north. There are 2 doors, one to the northeast, one to the southeast, one door going south, and then one open passageway heading to the west, and then one door on the southwest side. It's like, what was the first part again? So every one of these rooms is like heavily interconnected, and it's always a little trick. And I imagine that can be frustrating, not knowing exactly. So you kind of have to identify them by like, is that the one that's got the cold feeling from it? And it's tricky. Anyway, so that went well. So today, I'm going to try to save the banter. I don't know. It doesn't matter how we talk about the shows. If you're not familiar, this is a very casual show. It's springtime, and I'm still using my winter mug, for example, for my delicious coffee. Navy DM says, making it a war zone sounds great. It'll be a cool opportunity for massive cinematic moments. Yeah, I think so. Though, like, it's one way of kind of making the dungeons not so, make the dungeons not so dungeon-like, where they're just crawling from room to room. Hey, my mom is here. My mom's always had a tricky bit of being able to watch the live show versus accidentally clicking on the yesterday's show. So she's actually here. Everyone say hello to my mom. What was I talking about? Yeah, so having that third layer, the Fane of the Eye, is sort of a war zone, and that there's, you kind of have to deal with, like, there's a lot of things happening there that aren't involving you, and then the characters have to decide how they're going to engage with this. That could be pretty cool. So I'm digging that. And I think Evil John says, the iPad Pro is big enough to hold up and show the table. It is. It is also big enough to lay on the table and let everybody look at the table and see the map. So it's a big 12-inch iPad. So, it's not quite like the people who have those big HD monitors lying on the table. I would love to have something like that. So, hey, everybody's saying hi to mom. Anyway, so that worked well. So today, however, I am starting Chapter 3 of Waterdeep Dragon Heist, a chapter called Fireball. And I'll tell you that as strong starts go, blowing things up is a pretty good strong start. And one of the things I love about this chapter and the premise behind it is we are so familiar with Fireball as a spell in D&D overall, like for many, long time. And that with 5th edition, they really made Fireball powerful. So like old Fireballs, if you recall from 1st edition days, I think it started off at 1d6 per level of the caster. So if you were a 5th level caster, which is the earliest you can cast Fireball, you do a 5d6 Fireball. If you are a 15th level caster, your Fireball is increased to 15d6. And they were always, so that meant that the scale of power of a Fireball went up heavily as you leveled up. In 5th edition, obviously, you can scale up spells, but they don't scale automatically with level. You end up burning higher level spells to create bigger spells. So if they stuck with Fireball as being a 5d6 thing to start and then 1 die per everything else, then it's not super powerful. So they obviously chose that, like, what if we just bump up Fireball at level 3 as a 3rd level spell to 8d6? So when you consider that, like, a 2nd level spell for a wizard is Scorching Ray, does 3 beams that hit 3 targets for 2d6 damage each. Right? So you're doing not a poor amount of damage. Like Scorching Ray is a pretty good spell. It's about average of 7 damage per target for 3 targets. So that's 7, 14, 21 points of damage. That's against 3 people. So 21 points spread across 3 different targets. Fireball, on the other hand, does an average of 28 damage to everybody that it hits. So if you have a room full of people that are all packed together and you launch it, it does hundreds and hundreds of points of damage as 1 spell level higher. And I remember hearing Mike Merles talk about it, and he said that Fireball is purposefully overpowered. Like, they wanted Fireball to be something that really was like almost a game-breaking thing, right? And the reason why is that it's really, you want these power jumps, that it's boring. If everything is super linear and you can graph out every power curve, the game gets pretty stale. And the same is true with challenge rating on monsters. One of the reasons I'll talk about the fact that like a Intellect Devourer is crazy overpowered for its challenge rating, or a Banshee is also pretty crazy overpowered for her challenge rating. I don't think that that's bad, right? I think it's actually cool that they don't quite all work the same way. I think it's kind of a bummer when a high CR monster is underpowered. I would almost rather have them be either equal power or overpower, but I don't generally like a Beholder. So Beholders are really interesting. And Beholders are interesting because they are super overpowered for their challenge rating. They're really, really disastrous apocalypse monsters unless you do one thing. And if you do one thing to a Beholder, and it's really a variety of things, it completely negates almost everything they do. And that's blinding them, or blind darkness, fog cloud, invisibility, anything that cuts off sight between you and it makes Beholders go from one of the most deadly monsters in the game to one of the easiest monsters in the game. So, if you walk in, and I've seen this with 2 groups, right? I ran the same Beholder battle that was Belcor's. Belcor's the Beholder in Tomb of Annihilation against 2 different groups. And in one group, they wrapped him in a darkness cloud, and it nearly took him out completely. Like they he was still really dangerous, but he was a lot less dangerous. And the other group did not do so. And one character died and many characters were on the ropes. It was really tough. Lohan J says, linear design render the game down to a boring math. Yeah, linear design can be boring, and that's why it's nice to have things like plate armor, where you can have a low challenge rating monster that puts on a suit of plate armor, and now they have an AC of 18, right? And 18 is really high. If AC scaled linearly with level, like it did in earlier editions, the math can get kind of boring. And I think that in both 4th edition, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, I think the designers of probably every edition of D&D recognized that... every edition of D&D recognized that asymmetric math was more fun than symmetrical math. So Game Guy 415 asks, shouldn't the anti-magic eye cut through magical darkness? Yes, it does. However, the anti-magic eye also cuts through the Beholder's eye rays. You cannot fire an eye ray into the anti-magic cone, which is kind of a bummer, but it is actually canon. If you look back at first edition Beholders, it was the same way. And the anti-magic eye does not dispel ongoing magical effects. It suppresses them. So the trick is, so I'll give you three things, right? A, Beholders are really difficult. But for the 26 people watching in chat right now and anybody watching the video, the magical Sly Flourish tip, if you're fighting a Beholder, is throw darkness on it, or throw darkness on yourself, or make yourself invisible. Somehow break the sight connection between you and a Beholder, and it stops. And so that's the way. If you're a DM, I'll give you another tip, which is ensure that your Beholder has monsters with it that are not affected by its eye ray and could go beat the snot out of anybody who's concentrating on a spell that is breaking line of sight. So if there's somebody that's got a magical darkness up, time to send in those stone golems and punch the hell out of the guy with the darkness cloud. So there are a bunch of different monsters that are particularly effective. Blind sight monsters are great. I think my favorite ones, and I would definitely, like if you want to be a real bastard, have a Beholder room that obviously has those same symmetrical issues where it has lots of room to fly around. And then, so is there a ring? Is there a magic item? Game Guy 415, time to go do some homework. Is there a ring that gives somebody true sight? Is there a magic item that gives somebody true sight? Because like Belcor's, who was invisible, and that's pretty powerful for a Beholder. It would be really cool if they also had true sight. If not, you can always make up a magic item. It's got a ring of true sight, right? And it wears that so that it can cut through anything. That would be pretty great. Gem of Seeing, says Navy DM, of course, is here on the money. And it comes up with Gem of Seeing. Gem has 3 charges. You can speak the rare item. Wonder for the next 10 minutes you have true sight. Yeah, that's pretty powerful, and it is a rare item. So yes. And what I like about it is it's like a little monocle. So you could totally have a Beholder. Oh, I love this idea. A Beholder that's got like a steampunk monocle, right? It's like, I see you, MFer, and is blasting with spell. MFer, by the way, is not a swear word, just for the record. So that would be a really powerful move. Another thing is Helmed Horrors. Let's go pull up Helmed Horrors here. And I had kind of a debate with somebody on Twitter about this. Beyond. Yeah, isn't a monocle for Beholder an awesome idea? I'm totally going to do that next time I run a... And what I like is, you could do it where like the Beholder's like, oh no, they're invisible. And then like a little steampunk monocle comes out and it goes, oh, there you are. Right? Oh, sons of bitches. So Helmed Horrors are challenge 4s. They don't do a particularly large amount of damage, but they have blind sight. Right? Their senses, if I recall, they have blind sight, which means they can see through magical darkness and invisibility, which means they can go punch the hell out of your improved invisible mage. And I might beef them up. I'd probably give them some other, I'd give him some other spell because they have spell immunities, right? So you can do some stuff with that, but I might beef them up with some other stuff. AC is 20, right? AC 20, 60 hit points. So throw like 4 or 6 of these, 4 Helmed Horrors in along with your Beholder, and their purpose is just to bust concentration spells. Then they, are they immune to Eldritch Blast? How are they immune to Eldritch Blast? So, give Beholders. Here's your tip as a player. If you're fighting in a game against a Beholder, blind that sucker somehow. Somehow break line of sight. And if you are running Beholders, make sure that they've got friendly monsters, that particularly ones that have blind sight, that can go punch the hell out of other things. And you could have, like, if it's like a subterranean Beholder, maybe he's got pet bullets, right? I think bullets are, they have tremor sense. So tremor sense lets them see through blind. So you could have him like in a rocky area and he pulls up his 4 charmed bullets that do 30 points of damage on a hit. And they have this deadly leap, which is not magical, and that'll totally disrupt concentration spells. So yeah. Take a standard skeleton, cast continual flame on them, and put them in plate armor. Wait for your pieces to assume they're Helmed Horrors. Yeah, you could have a bunch, right? So like, which are the Helmed Horrors and which ones are skeletons? Helmed Horrors probably act pretty differently than a skeleton does. So my level 2 Waterdeep Dragon Heist party steamrolled the Apprentice Wizard and Intellect Devourer in the boss encounter. Yeah, they can get steamrolled, or they can. I threw a bunch of extra dudes in there, and I had some good distance between the mage, and it was more of a joke. I actually played it up. There's a wonderful video of Adventure Zone. I always get of Adventure Zone, where they're fighting the Black Spider. If you do Adventure Zone Black Spider, they have this great like final battle against the Black Spider where like he pulls his big move, and the big move is so lame that everyone immediately it's very funny. And the point is like it's okay to have like a boss steamrolled. And one of the things I did about the apprentice mage, the orc apprentice mage, is he believed he was like a 20th level. He was like a 20th level wizard, and he was casting Power Word Flame, which was whatever the cantrip Flame Strike is. And he just kept adding the word Power Word under the front of every spell that he cast. And if somebody in the chat wants to find that Adventure Zone clip, it is hysterical. It's one of the funniest D&D videos I've ever seen. And it has a really good point, which is dramatic situations don't need to be serious. Like, it's okay to have a boss who's just a nincompoop, right? And just pulls stupid stuff. And everyone's like, oh no, what are we going to do now? We're fighting a wizard and he's got, Power Word Fire, and it's hitting us for 7 points of damage. So, yeah. So there we are. All right, Dragon Heist. Let's talk a little bit about Dragon Heist. 23 minutes in, talking about the show. That's fun though. But about beholders. You got your beholder strategies this morning. So in our Dragon Heist game, we are starting with Fireball. Oh yeah, so I was talking about Fireball. That's how I got on this topic. So the cool thing about Fireball as a spell is that it's, as a plot element, it's really pretty cool. Because you don't think of it, this chapter uses it as a plot device instead of a spell. So the idea that you're walking around in a particular nice part of town and it explodes because of a magical fireball is pretty cool, right? Like, that's a great start, and it's great that to think of a fireball as a really dangerous, powerful thing, not as like a spell every wizard gets. So I like that it starts with this explosion, and then the whole rest of the chapter is sort of like deconstructing what happened at the explosion. So that's a really fun, really fun start to this chapter. And it's also a stark shift in tone. We were talking on Twitter yesterday about adventures where the tone of the adventure changed. And I talked about how the tone of Tomb of Annihilation, the one that obviously is high on my mind is that Tomb of Annihilation, the tone of the adventure changes significantly when you're in Omu and then go into the Tomb of the Nine Gods. That the shift between those two halves of the book, it's a totally different kind of game. And likewise, chapter 2 is this get to know Waterdeep, get involved in a little bit of plots here and there, go do some character stuff, build up your house, do all this stuff. And you're kind of all over the place. There's no real central plot. You don't know what the hell happened to Raynar Neverember. You don't know anything about the missing gold. None of the real story of this adventure takes place in chapter 2. And then all of a sudden a fireball explodes and bang, the whole adventure narrows back down to the main story. And I think it is going to be a relief for my group. And I think it is going to be a relief in general for many groups, because the best time to drop the fireball in is right at the point, if you think about like the pace of a game and the beats of the game, right when it's starting to die down and you're like, oh, everything's cool and yeah, everything's cool. Boom, you drop a fireball and the beat goes right back up again. And now you're deep into the adventure. So it's a good thematic change between chapter 2 and chapter 3. So I thought yesterday I was finishing up the second draft of my article on describing chapter 2 of Dragon Heist. And I came to a few thoughts and experiences of my own that I wanted to share. I share in the article, and I thought I'd share here too, about like what to do with chapter 2 now that I've gotten through it. And the chapter 2, it's not my favorite. And it's not my favorite because it is so wide, and I don't think it gives DMs enough tools to really run it effectively. Chapter 2 kind of breaks down into two main activities. Activity 1 is building your mansion, and activity number 2 is getting involved in the factions. And you can add other activities in, and I actually recommend that I have had good experience. I've had a good it's been a good it's valuable for me to add in other things inside chapter 2 as well. An example is I ran Blue Alley as part of Chapter 2, and the players like that a lot because, again, it kind of narrowed the choices down, and they're like, we're going into Blue Alley, and we're doing stuff in Blue Alley, and then they enjoyed that. But my group is not a big fan. I've had this a couple times. Same thing happened when I ran Storm King's Thunder. I don't think they're very, these are all AL players. They're great people, really fantastic players. But I think they're used to having like a more focused storyline. And when it's wide open, that's not the kind of game they're used to. They don't mind it, and they're having a good time, but they're kind of like a little lost, right? And they're kind of like, I don't know. And one player was like, yeah, I kind of want to complete every quest, but I know I'm not going to be able to. And so he's a struggle. So they like it when things narrow down. I can definitely tell. And so throwing Blue Alley in the middle of Chapter 2 worked well. I also kind of hooked onto a bunch of character things. So the NPCs that they seem to resonate with and that I felt like had a good connection, those are the NPCs that really came forward in Chapter 2. The example is Yagra Stonefist, the Zinterim, is the lady friend of Sir Anton Greycastle, one of the players. So I made sure that she came in and she kind of recruited him, and she's using him to smuggle goods, and I thought that was kind of fun. So there's a lot of options to throw in character-driven stuff, which I'm sure is the intention of the adventure, is like, make sure to bring the character, build this chapter into you, and blah, 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 blah. I just feel like there isn't enough in that chapter to really help people with this. Building up Trollskull Manor is the other big piece, and that can be, there's a dial on that you can turn of like, how into the weeds do you want to get? Some players might really like dealing with all the accounting of how to build up the thing and how to build up the inn and how to deal with all of the different factions and all of the different guilds that you need in order to build it. Other people might be like, oh, man, can I just throw money at this thing? And you're like, yeah, they hire someone and that person's dealing with all the guilds. And my group did that. They had an old friend who was a member of the Brewers Guild, and he said, look, I know all the people. You pay me, I'll pay them. I'll take 5%. And, you just keep flooding money and I'll keep building up your base. And they're like, yeah, that's good. We're happy with that. Because these guys like to do adventuring. The other thing that Chapter 2 does, as written, is introduces the factions. And in the book, there are 7 factions. There's the core 5 factions. Emerald Enclave, Zinterim, Harpers, Order of the Gauntlet, and Lord's Alliance. Hey, look at me. I can remember all the factions. It only took 5 years. And they add 2, Brigandarth, I don't know how to pronounce them, and the Grey Hands. And my recommendation, I try not to do too much recommending because my life is not your life and you might want to do what you want to do, but I will share my experiences. And my experience was I had a lot of good luck by dramatically reducing the number of factions that got involved. So instead of having 7 faction agents show up at the door, I picked like 2 or 3. And the 3 that I picked were Brigandarth and the Grey Hands, but only really subtly, and the Zinterim. Those are the only guilds that have introduced themselves in Chapter 2, and they're really more introduced less as as factions and more as NPCs that they're dealing with that happen to be part of a faction. So I particularly like bringing in the Grey Hands and Brigandarth because they are 2 that the players are not familiar with. Where the other ones, if they've been playing Adventures League or playing the hardback adventures for a long time, they're pretty familiar with the other 5 factions. I also think it's very interesting that Season 8 of it, not to get into Adventures League. Sorry, everybody, I'm going to get into Adventures League for a second. It's very interesting to me that Season 8 got rid of the factions, kind of, in Adventures League for the most part. But then the hardcover adventure, it's one of the only hardcover adventures that actually focuses on the factions. I thought that was weird and seemed like a strange way to, I don't know. It didn't seem very well coordinated. But whatever. In my case, I would recommend picking 1 or 2 or maybe 3 factions and introducing those and skipping the ones that are kind of boring. Like, I've had the Harpers and stuff for so long. I don't need any more Harper stuff. And I have never had Grey Hands and I've never had Brigandarth. So let's bring them in and have them involved. So that I think worked really well for me. The last recommendation I have is I think you can do a lot of fun. And if you watch previous episodes, you'll hear about the haunting of Trollskull Manor. And I think you can do a lot of fun if you bring in particularly maybe a green hag. There's a mention in the background that there was a hag who used to run the place as an orphanage. And I think it could be a lot of fun to bring that hag in as a villain that's sort of out there in the side, right? And they have to sort of rid her haunting of the of Trollskull. Take The Shining and It and, you know, grab all the best parts from that and throw that into a haunted mansion sort of thing. If you want, it's an option, right? Like I ran it both ways. I've ran this adventure now twice, and both times I did the haunting, and they liked the haunting. I think that that was a memorable moment. So, so I think that that's a pretty good thing. So that's chapter 2, and then we have chapter 3. So now 30 minutes in, let's prepare for our game. Let us drop over to Sublime. I have my fresh game notes here. So we have our characters. Unfortunately, one of my players has stepped away. Galen, the player has said that he cannot keep up. He's got too many commitments on Sundays and is not able to play. So I now have 5 characters. I actually need to bring in another player. I like to have 6 full-time players, and I have a couple of part-time players, but I don't have any full-time. Reminds me, I should also ask my friend James if he can play. He might be able to play. So we have 5 characters. Lord Anton Greycastle. He is a noble and fighter, and he has a special lady friend, Yagra. So he's doing stuff with his intern but doesn't realize it. His family is a rival of Zardoz Zord. We have Banjo Wilkerson, a Tiefling Bard, just got an instrument of the Bards, was kidnapped by Frewn, and is trying to build a banjo, and now has a magical banjo. John the Grizzled, one thing, because like we're only running this game until 5th level or 6th level, and then we're going to stop and play Saltmarsh. So I'm okay overpowering these guys a bit. Like, why don't I give them, like, I want to make sure every character gets one like benchmark item, you know, like a really good, I mean, not like a Holy Avenger, but they should get a strong magic item. John the Grizzled is a gruff, dirty dwarf arcane cleric who would much rather be in a library than talking to people, but it still gets along with the group just fine, and he knows that there's something going on with the Nine Hells. Uranus is a drow Pact of the Fiend warlock. He has a connection to a patron named Izikul, who is a devil that collects protégés for Asmodeus. However, it might be that things in hell are, that there's, I kind of like the idea that a power struggle in hell might be causing the power struggle between the Castellanters and Uranus and his patron, and that's why Uranus is here. And then you have Agarin, who is a human rogue investigator that he's too old for this shit, and he was kicked out of the city watch for embezzlement, but in reality, he's an agent of the Grey Hands. So imagine the character in The Departed, not Matt Damon's character, but the other actor, crap, the guy that was in Django Unchained. Damn it, Castigan. So the guy that goes undercover, right? He shows up, and they say, you know, you could be a cop. Yeah, Leonardo DiCaprio's character. You know, you could be a cop, right? And then I kind of saw that this is sort of what happened to Agarin. They're like, look, you want to just be a freaking member of the City Watch? You have an IQ of 190, right? Like, you're not going to last here, and you're here for the wrong reason. How about you really serve Waterdeep? But in order to do so, your reputation is going to be shot. No one's going to like you. You're not going to have any friends. And the whole City Watch is going to know that you are a embezzler and a bad guy. And you will have gone to jail for it. And now you're just this rogue who goes out there. But in secret, you're working for the Blackstaff, right? And that's his character. He's secretly working for the Blackstaff, which I think is awesome. And so I regularly give him, it's pretty funny. I'll every so often I'll take Pat, the player, aside, and I'll mention some stuff to him. And one of the other players is like, "What are you talking about? Like, are you kidding me? What is that?" You know, and I'm like, "No, it's cool." It's like, "What are you doing?" So he gets kind of upset when one character learns something that the other one's don't. So those are the characters. Strong start. Boy, this is easy. Fireball. That's the strong start, right? Don't have to worry about anything else, because there's a picture right down there of a fireball. Boom. Easiest strong start ever. Secret tip about blowing things up. Stephen King, my favorite author, wrote The Stand. And when he was in the middle of The Stand, this is a 1,000-page book he wrote. And in the middle, it might be, I don't know, it's maybe the best book ever. It's a really fantastic book. And very D&D like book. Like, it's, all end of the world and all. It's really great just awesome book. So are the Dark Tower series. The Dark Tower books are fantastic as well. I highly recommend all of them. And anyway, he was halfway through writing The Stand, and he was like, man, this book is out of control. I've got like 36 main characters. I've got all of these interwoven plots. I've got all this stuff going on. I have no idea what to do. And he was ready to trash the novel. And he said, well, I already wrote 500 pages. Like, I don't want to throw away a 500-page novel, but this thing is just out of hand, and I don't know where it's going to go. And he was talking to his wife, and he was out for one of his legendary walks. And he stopped, and he goes, I'll blow him up. And so he had one of the villains blow up a meeting of all of the main characters. And like 2/3 of them die. Spoiler. And, you know, that narrowed his focus of that book considerably, right? So if you ever feel like it's a very Game of Thrones thing to do, and you shouldn't do it without care. In fact, I have another sort of a Thanos, no spoilers. No spoilers. I'm going to see Avengers tonight. If anybody in chat spoils, you will regret it. But a very Thanos way of handling this situation is if you decide, so if you're running a game and you're like, I got too many NPCs and too many plots and too much stuff going on, not the characters, you know, having an explosion blow up a whole bunch of them, pretty great way to go. But if you really want to be cool, and this is what I kind of wish they had done at the end of the last Avengers movie, instead of like having the story dictate which ones live and which ones die, roll randomly for it. So if you assume that like a bunch of the characters are in a room, a bunch of NPCs are in a room, and somebody drops a fireball in the room, you can roll saving throws and on all of the characters and see which ones die and which ones live, and then build the story out of the ones that survive. And you have no idea which ones are going to survive. And maybe the main one that everybody's friend is dead, and this other guy who's kind of a nincompoop is alive. Now the whole story shifts. I think that that's a great way to use randomness to take a story and just rotate it 180 degrees. So that could be very cool. I may do that today. Maybe I will roll randomly for like which of the NPCs that were on the alley died and which did not. Because they met a few of them. They didn't really have a lot of interaction with a lot of the people here. So I don't know that that's going to play out. So let's look at the scenes. This chapter, go back, Helmed Horrors. I guess that was too far. Sources, adventures. It's alphabetical in this list, on the other. So Fireball. So this chapter, we know, so it's important for us in this chapter to recognize what actually happened. So what happened? And what happened here is Dalakar, the rock gnome, who worked for Dagalt, was bringing the Stone of Galore to the characters. He had he had multiple members of different groups hunting him down. I don't know that it will necessarily be the Zinterim. But we know that so we have this Zent assassin. I don't know that we want them to be Zents. Maybe. I mean, it could still be. He could be like an ex-Zent, right? We could also have some Xanathar guys that were hunting him. But we know that who grabs the Stone of Galore? And the Stone of Galore itself was grabbed by... Yeah, so Erstal grabbed it. Erstal Floxen was a former Zent. So we got to now we got to drop in our NPCs, right? He's an assassin, former Zent assassin, who now works for Castlelanters, right? And he disappears. He is the one that's heading to Growlhund, right? And he's heading there. he's heading there to what? This is important. So he actually has the stone, right? And I guess, he goes to the Growlhunts to start chapter 4. And by the time the characters, so the main scenes of this one are hunting down the stone. So the scenes are, there's a fireball, aftermath, Raynar, right? I think Raynar eventually shows up. Because at this point it's too late. Like, he was worried about losing the stone, but now the stone's already gone. Then they're hunting down the stone, and they go to, eventually they end up at the Growlhund Villa. Right? And they break in there, and that's when they're going to start figuring out that the Growlhund, they already kind of know that the Growlhunds and the Castellanters are connected. But if they're tracking the stone, if they're tracking the stone, they're gonna end up at Growlhund Villa, and in the basement of Growlhund Villa is a portal that the guy runs through, and that's what starts the chase. Although in mine, I'm not running it. I'll give you a early preview of chapter 4, which is I don't run it as a chase. I didn't run it as a chase when I ran it before, and it worked out really well. Instead, it is a trail that the characters follow to investigate where exactly the Stone of Galore went through. So both chapter 2, 3, and 4, Fireball and the next one, are really about hunting down the stone and picking apart the plot, the sinister plot. Those are the two main things that comes up. We have, the watch shows up, eyewitnesses. So there's a whole sort of side thing about the side thing about the nimble right? And I don't think, like, there's a whole potential, what do they call it? False thread to hunt the nimble right, which goes to, like, you end up at, like a, Necklace of Fireballs is pretty great. Yeah, Nim, right? But instead of churning this, like, Nim was given to the temple as a gift from a visiting creating his own one of those inventions, right? There's a whole thing about hunting down Nim. And I think it can lead to a false connection. So what are the main things? Like, this is where secrets and clues are important, because we can drop a whole bunch of secrets and clues. And then as the characters conduct their investigations, that's when they can uncover various clues that are all going to lead to Growlhund. So our first biggest secret and clue, first secret and clue is that I'm spelling his name differently every time. Like, that's the biggest one, right? Is that, like, that's what actually happened. Is Asmodeus spelled with an S or a Z? There's lots of secrets and clues in this one. What's the name of the temple? This is also the time when they're going to learn about the dragons, right? So they're going to learn a lot. This whole thing, they could learn a lot of stuff. And maybe if we want to throw a fight in this fireball, because it's always nice. Let me see. So I've been typing a lot. Let's go in the chat and see what people are saying here. Got through my weight set thanks to Twitch chat. It's funny. Get a little exercise in while you're watching this. Stephen King, kill your darlings. Yeah, he really does kill his darlings. SKT, epic piece, character development to the PCs, roll in the open. I played Dragon Heist and my character was close with a number of the dead NPCs. I was actually pretty devastated that they got killed. Wow, yeah. It really did propel my character for the rest of the adventure. The Xanathar's guild members, it fits better with the investigator PC anyway. Yeah, since you're recruiting a replacement player, one of the secrets and clues related to that character, if the person has them figured out, might be fun. Yeah, I'll have to figure that out. I don't think I'm going to recruit. I mean, I'm going to ask a friend of mine to go today. But I don't think he can be a regular. He's got has other commitments on many weekends too, so he can't always make it. So he's one of the on-calls. What else is going on here? Might be interesting to run into a minor combat or encounter with opposing factions on the same trail. Yeah. Yeah, I think it'd be fun if some of the Zhentarim guys got a... Yeah. Could be a couple of Zhentarim thugs, right? Ex-Zhentarim thugs that work for Urstel. That could be fun too if you want to have a, so I mean, I still go with the like, are we, running Chinatown or are we running Roadhouse, right? And or Walker, I always go with the Walker Texas Ranger D&D rule, which is like a lot of times our players, they just want to watch people get roundhouse kicked in the face, right? And too much, like we could get really deep into like these mysteries and all these threads, and it's like LA Confidential. But man, we just want to watch a fight. Yeah, Roadhouse is such an amazing, absurd plot. I know. I actually watched clips from Roadhouse yesterday. I have an undefensible love of Roadhouse. It's such a bad movie, but it's so great. I haven't watched it in years too. I have to watch that one. I wonder if it's available on streaming somewhere. I don't think I'd pay $1 for it, but the point is like, a lot of times our D&D games, like I think this is a general, here's a little general philosophy, right? And the general philosophy is that like we probably think too hard about our adventures and our campaigns. I think it's every so often we have players who are really on the stick. I have 2 players, one in each of my games, that are really on the stick and they really know what's going on and they're keeping careful notes and they really are on top of things and like they could handle more complexity. I don't think they need more complexity, but they certainly. Hey, it's on Amazon Prime. Awesome. I'm gonna watch Roadhouse sometime. Maybe while I'm painting miniatures. That would be I'm going to paint my Reaper miniatures. I just washed 30 minis. So they have all the resin off of them or all the, whatever, the casting agent on it. So they're ready to paint. So maybe I'll watch Roadhouse and paint minis. That sounds like a wonderful afternoon. So we think too hard and the storylines can be pretty straightforward and simple. Escape from New York. So Escape from New York is actually a really good movie. We're unlike Roadhouse, which is a terrible movie that I love. Escape from New York is fantastic. LA, I'm not so sure, but New York is great. So sometimes if you have a fireball blow up and you have like a bunch of investigations, sometimes it's really good to just get into a fight, and just throw a bunch of thugs. Man, I love my thugs, and thugs and maybe a mage or a cultist, right? Could be in there. That would be pretty great. So I don't have to worry. Okay. So I got more secrets I could do, but let's jump ahead a little bit. So monsters, we can have thugs. We could have a veteran if we wanted, and we could maybe, I don't know if we want to throw a mage. A mage is pretty powerful at this point. They don't have the problem. One of the problems with the NPCs in the monster manuals, there's no low-level wizard. We could always just have like a low-level, right? Low-level spellcaster, or maybe a scout. Treasure is important in this one. So fantastic locations I don't really have to worry about because there are plenty in the book. This is one of the advantages of running a published adventure is we can generally skip that piece. But treasure. So who has good treasure? Does Anton? I think Anton got a new sword. So I should write this in treasure. Does Anton have a good sword? It's definitely so. Uranus. I'm going to give him a rod. I definitely want to give him a Rod of the Pack Keeper because it's such a great item for it. It's a real powerful item for a real powerful item for a warlock. Agron, I think he still loves his crossbow. He always loves crossbow, so. And Greycastle, so Banjo already, he got his. So Prayer Bee, well, so somebody's going to get a necklace of fireballs, right? We'll see where that goes. Yeah, the Apprentice Wizard is not bad. Navy DM says the Kobold Inventor is a pretty good one. Yeah, I'll tell you, for a challenge 1/4 monster, that guy has the biggest stat block ever. Like, stat block is freaking huge. Oh my God. It's a great, I mean, it's fantastic, but holy cow, that's huge. But I love, like, talk about a flavorful monster. It's one of the best. And the funny thing is, I think they had a similar kobold, like crazy kobold, in the Tome of Beasts. So there's multiple versions of crazy kobolds. So I probably need one. What do I think the cleric would like? A holy symbol. What's a good? So this is an arcane cleric. What would be a good magic item for an arcane cleric? What would be sort of like a defining magic item for an arcane cleric? Help me, Twitch. Help me, Twitch. You're my only hope. Man, this French press coffee is so good. My favorite Starbucks, because I'm, privileged. I have a favorite Starbucks. And my favorite Starbucks is closing, as is my next favorite Starbucks. So I'm learning how to make my own coffee. A ring of spell storing. That'd be pretty great. Can a ring of spell storing work for the problem a lot of times with the ring of spell storing is it usually goes to a non-spellcaster because it means that they can cast a spell. Pearl of Power would be pretty great. I kind of want to give something that says cleric in particular. Navy DM always has good stuff. An ion stone would be pretty cool. I think the prayer beads. I always liked necklace of prayer beads. So I'll probably drop that on. Yeah, I think necklace of prayer beads is a good one, and I can select the spells that kind of work, but that is always a really good, powerful item. So what was I talking about? I was talking about something important, but as somebody put a message and it got skipped. Dyson187 says, hello, new DM here, new to the game as a whole since January. Welcome, January. That's awesome. You picked one of the best hobbies. Would getting Return to the Lazy Dungeon Master cover most of the info I should know, or is there a good chunk of stuff in the first book that isn't in the second? You can start with Return. Return is all-inclusive, and honestly, so they're different books. And the very first comment on Amazon was that the first book is better, which made me very sad. But everyone else doesn't necessarily agree. And I personally think the second book is way better. I put a lot more into the second book. So you don't need to buy the first book. If you are really into the idea and you want to absorb everything there is about it, then the first book is worth getting. But you can start with the second. It is not required to get the first. As a new DM, I also would recommend if you're asking me, and you are, right? So the Start Here page on Sly Flourish, I highly recommend because that's got all the articles that I hand selected that I think are worthwhile. But I also have this articles for new Dungeon Masters, and there's 6 articles here that kind of get into 6 big topics. These were commissioned by the folks at D&D Beyond. I originally wrote them for D&D Beyond. They gave me permission to post them on my site as well. So if I was to write a guide for new Dungeon Masters, this is what I would write. And it starts with this: finding and maintaining a D&D group. I will link that here in the chat. And there are 6 articles in the series. Some of these you might already, be past, and you may not need. But it's always hard for somebody who's very experienced with D&D to try to give advice to new DMs because I'm not in your shoes. I don't even know what the game is like for new DMs now because I've been in it for so long. So but I tried my best to say what's the advice that I would give to a new DM. Advice being bullshit because I'm not in your shoes. So hopefully that helps. And I think I've certainly heard from people who are new to DMing who have read Return and said, this really helps. And one of the reasons why is it has a framework for prep that a lot of people don't have. I've been reading through various articles there. I just haven't bought any of your books yet. And it feels necessary with how much I've been reading and watching of yours already. So it's not necessary. And what I would recommend is check out the sample chapters, PDF preview. So this has a lot, right? I wanted to have a free preview. It's 11 pages. And it talks about the philosophy and it gives the core, what we're doing with Return, and then also has the outline of the 8 steps. So if you read this and you're like, holy cow, this is really helpful, I want more, then spend the $8 and buy the book. And I try to keep it cheap. It's worth more than $8, but I want everybody to have it. Otherwise you can kind of dig through and read through the site and you get a lot of stuff. So I know money's not easy for everybody. And I don't presume that it is, but if it is, then take a look at it. I mean, it's, I think it's the best thing I ever wrote, but I would. We ran Fandelver and are starting with some homebrew later tonight, so a little worried about a full sandbox with all of us being new. Yeah, and lots of advice. So another thing I'll recommend, Monday. So tomorrow I am publishing an article on Sly Flourish in which I interviewed Wolfgang Bauer, who is a former Wizards of the Coast employee and former TSR employee and the creator of Midgard, and probably a super smart, one of the biggest brains in D&D. The YouTube video is already available. Here it is. Wolfgang Bauer. Oh, man. How about I don't play it? So that is the interview with him. And we talk about world building. So my article on Monday dissects the conversation that I had with him and talks about like his main tips. But you can read them there. So if you are getting started in a homebrew adventure, that I think that can be helpful. Probably the biggest advice, and both Wolfgang gave it, Enrique Bertrand, the newbie DM, gave it, who also thinks a lot about what it's like to be a new DM. And I recommend it as well, which is figure out where your characters are and just build concentric rings out from there. Don't try to build your whole world. I mean, you can, and some people love it, but it's not what is going to help your game generally. Instead, think about, like, start with the characters and their background. That's why I have the checklist, and you're going to hear the same crap from me all the time, right? But start with the characters and their backgrounds, build around those, think about like ripples that expand out from each of the backgrounds of the characters, because that's what the players care about, right? And then think over the horizon. So like if you're in a homebrew, if you ran Fandelver, but if Fandelver is in your own world, then what are the next nearest towns, or what are the settlements, or what are the dungeons or old ruins that are around Fandelver that they can get involved in? Think about like what's within walking distance of them. Don't worry about the empires, and don't worry about the 50,000 year history, and don't worry about the boss battles, or don't worry about the outer planes. Like, you can, and it's fun to think about that stuff, but you're not really, in my opinion, and in my experience, when I'm most effective thinking about the things that I'm running in my game, it's when I'm thinking about the things that are going to be immediately impacting the players. And usually that means, what's the next session, right? What are we doing in our next session? And how am I going to run that? And then you can kind of drop in, like through secrets and clues, you can drop in a lot of little bits of lore that you want to seed into the adventure that can like lead off, like, hey, there's ancient ruins beneath, like here, watch, I'll drop one in right here. I'll drop in a new secret. And that secret will be the cellar of Trollskull Manor leads to the sewers of Waterdeep, which in turn lead to a hidden layer of Undermountain. Right? Holy cow. Boom, 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 boom. So I just dropped in one secret that I can plop in the game somewhere maybe, and they will have to, they might figure out, oh my God, we have a hole in our basement that leads down to the largest dungeon in the Forgotten Realms. So that can work really well. Reskinning. And so you're already using the right terms, right? You reskinned Neverwinter, and they're starting from a new capital tonight, trying to get everyone on board with background stories, info, and their characters to build from. Don't have a lot to go with yet. Yeah. You're thinking right. Don't force the issue either. You don't necessarily need all of your players to come up with every aspect of their background early on in the game. I mean, if they got through Fandelver, they're already 4th level-ish or 5th level-ish. So, yeah, that can work. DW Jill, who probably I probably owe a little money to because he's endorsing my book, says, I highly recommend Fantastic Adventures and the mini dungeon tome for adventures and dungeons you can drop it in demand. That was why I wrote Fantastic Adventures. If you ever need an adventure that you want to throw in your world that doesn't have too much lore tied in with everything else, that's why I wrote Fantastic Adventures. And I'm writing a new thing that will help as well. And if you want a sneak preview of that new thing, and this will be my last little pitch today because we're already past 11. If you enjoy this show, if you enjoy the content that I put out on Sly Flourish, if you enjoy the articles I put out on Sly Flourish, if you enjoy my tweets, then please take a look at my Patreon page. I will drop it in the notes. Patreon patreon.com/slyflourish. And, oh, don't look at that. It's got the amount of money I make. But you can subscribe because I'm logged in. I don't know if I'm getting the amount of money. But so that Patreon, I talked about this yesterday too. I'll just give my little pitch for the Patreon. The Patreon helps take the burden of the costs of doing this show and keeping up my website and subscribing. I use a social media platform called Hootsuite that I have to pay for. The Patreon helps pay for all of that stuff and keeps the burden of paying for the rest of the Sly Flourish, all the free Sly Flourish stuff that everybody gets. And there's a lot. That burden is no longer falls on the sales of the books. That burden now falls on Patreon, hopefully. And I think it does. I think the expenses are pretty well covered. As a Patreon backer, so the reason why you would back my Patreon is not to get a bunch of free cool stuff, or not free, obviously, but it's not to get a bunch of separate stuff that everyone else doesn't get. It is if you enjoy the free stuff you've been getting and you want to give a little something back and you have the means to do so, that is the way to do so. However, you do get probably two things out of the Patreon. Maybe more, we'll see. We'll see what time allows for. I would kind of like to do a Patreon video where members of the Patreon, the Sly Flourish superfans and I, the Sly Flourish Empire, I should just call you guys the Empire, we could get together and do like a video where I can like talk about new future things that I wouldn't necessarily talk about in public. But one of the things you get as a Patreon backer is early in every month, like within the first week of the month, you will get a Sly Flourish newsletter, which is an email. It's a letter that talks about here are the things that you Patreon supporters helped back that the Sly Flourish Empire put out this month. And it also has a little section of like things that caught my interest. These are cue the Empire music. Yeah. We're a friendly Empire. We're a very loose, like relaxed collective of Empire like. But hopefully we will take over. And so you get a newsletter that talks about all of the things that I've put out over the past month, links to all the stuff that I put out, so you can kind of keep tracking. I don't expect anybody's like, oh, I'm going to watch 5 hours of video and then read 4 articles, but you can pick the ones that are interesting. It'll also have like what were the top tweets, like which tweets were most popular that I put out over the past month. I have metrics that I can run to do that. And it will also have like, these are the things that caught my attention, either videos or articles or new products or anything where I was like, wow, that was really cool. And, I thought it was really cool and I want to promote it. You will see that in the newsletter as well. The newsletter is once a month so that I'm not flooding people's email. So there's that. The other thing that Patreon backers will get is the opportunity to take a look at some early material that I'm putting out for new books and new products. It is an opportunity to playtest new stuff. And right now there is a playtest for the first thing of the 10 things I am putting together in my next book. So that is an opportunity. If you back the Patreon, you can see that and you can see where we're headed. So and it's a good way to get something in there. Is there an archive of previous newsletters? There has only been one newsletter so far. The Patreon's less than a month old. So there's been one newsletter that I did when I first started. And if you back the Patreon, you get all the posts, all old posts. So you can see all the old stuff. There's only been 2. And the 2 posts were the original newsletter and the playtest material. And if you playtest it, I would love it if you playtest it. You are under no obligation because you're paying me. But if you did playtest it, I would love feedback on the adventure because that's the one. Oh, I said adventure. If you were to playtest the thing, then that will ensure it is going to be the preview for the Kickstarter. So it is just like the preview chapters for Return. That is going to be one of the 2 preview chapters that will be available for the Kickstarter that's coming out in June. So that's an opportunity to see that. So that was like a 10-minute pitch for Patreon. But I hope that was okay. I want to thank everybody for, I love that I have like my own video. Don't look at that. Put the fireball back up. I want to thank everybody for an awesome chat today. Mom, thank you for coming. Glad you could make it in. Game Guy 1415. Spoilers. But you can go back to Patreon and find out what it is. It's pretty cool. I'm really excited about it. And I'm getting artwork in. And man, the artwork is great. And I'm not going to be posting artwork early except to Patreon backers who have already seen some of the artwork. So if you're a Patreon backer, you can see some of the artwork of the new thing and start to figure out what it is. But it's pretty cool. I'm pretty happy with it. I've been working on it I wrote it in March. I took 3 weeks off in March and wrote it, but I've been thinking about it for probably 4 or 5 months before then. So it's going pretty well. Anyway, thank you all for a wonderful show. Have a great Sunday. and go play some D&D, and I will see you guys next week. Thank you very much.